And I thought, oh, this is the through line or the lens through which to tell this whole story. And all those other strands I had been thinking about kind of, I don't know if I want to say took a back seat, but were all in sort of service to that piece of the story.
Hi, I'm Bethany Saltman, a literary agent and award-winning author.
And I'm Fran Hauser, a best-selling author and independent bookstore owner.
And this is the Bookbound podcast.
On this podcast, we talk to women writers about their nonfiction books.
But instead of talking about what their book is about, we focus on the process of getting their book into the world.
These How I Did It conversations will help you pitch your big idea,
write killer proposals,
find the right agent and publisher,
and live an amazing bookbound life. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest, Ruthie Ackerman. Ruthie is an award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in Vogue, Glamour, Forbes, The Atlantic, and many more. Her modern love essay for the New York Times became the launching point for her memoir, The Mother Code: My Story of Love, Loss, and the Myths That Shape Us. In 2019, Ruthie founded the Ignite Writers Collective, and since then, she's become a sought-after book coach and developmental editor. In our conversation, Ruthie shares so many powerful insights, including what it takes to turn a personal story into a universal one, the emotional ROI of a book tour, and why social media is becoming less and less essential to an author's platform. We also talk about the important role her modern love essay played in shaping her book, and it might not be what you think. But I'll let the conversation do the rest of the talking. Let's dive into our chat with Ruthie.
Hi, Ruthie.
Hi, so good to be here.
Hi, Ruthie. It's so nice to see you.
Bethany, it has been so long of hearing about you, reading your book, talking to Fran about you, and now we're here finally.
It's wonderful. I'm so excited. So we'd like to start every episode asking this question, and I cannot wait to hear how you respond because I've been really enjoying reading your book. So how did you know that you were on a deeply personal journey? How did you know, or when did you know that this was more than just a personal journey or obsession or even an intellectual pursuit and an actual book?
It's such a good question, and there's many different ways to answer that. I had always known I wanted to write a memoir, and there's many strands in the book that I had thought would be individual books. So, for example, there's a lot about my relationship with my mother in the book, and I had planned on writing a whole book about my relationship with my mother. And then at another point, I thought I'd write a whole book about my relationship with my brother, who I talk about. I call him Adam in the book. And he was born with a triple whammy of rare genetic disorders. And I thought I'd write all about trying to be his guardian and take care of him. And then I thought that I would write about my divorce. So this book has taken many different shapes. So I was already, I guess, primed in some way to be thinking about this whole story as a book, but I wasn't sure if it was multiple books or one book. And then when I wrote my modern love essay, which was published in 2019, and I always like to say that I wrote like 5 versions of that essay that were all rejected before that one was accepted. And when I wrote that essay, I said, oh, this is the kind of through line. And that essay was about how I had frozen my eggs when I was in my first marriage, and how when I was finally ready to use those eggs, none of them ended up being viable. And I thought, oh, this is the through line or the lens through which to tell this whole story. And all those other strands I had been thinking about kind of, I don't know if I want to say took a back seat, but were all in sort of service to that piece of the story.
You basically got the editor's validation, right? Because they rejected the first 4. And then this one, they said, yep, this is the one.
This is the one. Exactly. But I will say this, because I already had an agent at the time, because I had another book that was supposed to be published, another whole story for another day. But I had an agent, And she went and started talking to various editors about my idea. And the response we had gotten was fertility books and motherhood books don't sell. And so I was sort of thinking, I guess maybe I don't write this as a book because it's not going to sell or no one's really interested in this topic area. But then again, I was sort of angry too because I'm like, I don't really see this as a fertility or a motherhood book only, even though it's kind of, unfortunately, with the name mother in the title, it's going to be seen as a motherhood book. But it's about so much more. It's about a woman whose life sort of veers off course. And so I felt a little pigeonholed by this idea that it's only a fertility or a motherhood book.
Well, it's such a great story for our listeners because for so many reasons. One, just the idea that you pitched or you actually wrote 4 versions of a modern love essay, and the 5th one was accepted. So please, I want this in flashing lights for our listeners. And this is a professional writer. So that's really amazing. And I mean, you say for another time, but we love the conversations about this agent and that agent and what happened to that story. And that's, part of the juice of this. But I love the idea that it took you, 5 versions of one essay to figure out the through line because, well, actually, how many people come to what they think is going to be their book. And, and I'll say, this is a great idea. I'm totally into it. This is a great start, but this isn't the idea. You haven't found your idea yet. And, people say, what do you mean this is the idea? And, you just have to kind of work with them and say, I know there's a story here. This isn't it yet. You haven't found it yet.
I'm so curious too, Ruthie, because you're a book coach and you've helped so many people get their books out into the world. Like, what was the process like for you? I mean, in coaching yourself through this process, was it easier or harder than coaching others?
It's always harder, I think, for ourselves. I mean, Bethany and both of you, I want to hear what you guys think, but I just think we are kind of blinded by our own stories and what's important. We feel an emotional connection to something that might not be something that an audience is that interested in. It's also what was hard for me to see was what the universal story was going to be. So I think you sort of started to hit on this, Bethany, that this is a very personal story, but it was only through writing the book that I started to see, oh, this is a bigger story about motherhood narratives and how patriarchy tells us what motherhood has to look like and how it might be very different than the experiences we're hoping to have as mothers or just as women, as non-mothers. And so I started kind of getting into the ideas around these binaries women are sort of boxed into by society. But I thought this was going to be purely a personal story. And it was only through going through the process that I was like, oh, now I see the universal, which is something I tell my writers. But it's hard when you're in that dark tunnel and you're writing. And I had, by this point, already had my book deal, by the way. And so I was like calling my editor and saying, I think you bought a book that, like, I don't know what this is actually. You bought this book and it doesn't have all the pieces that I thought it was going to have. It doesn't have a universal. And she's like, just keep going. It will. And it did. But it's hard when you're in it to see it.
I've studied a lot of screenwriting. And so the way I often talk to my clients about it is the A story and the B story. And the thing that you think is the A story often ends up being the B story, and there's something bigger, but it's really hard to find.
And isn't this also why I think it's so important to not write alone and in a vacuum?
Yeah.
Because it is so hard to go from the personal to the universal. It's easier for us when we're helping others to look at it from a 10,000 foot view and guide them and give them some prompts and thought starters. And whether you're working with a coach or you're working with a circle of other writers, it is so important to not go down this journey or to, down this path alone.
And I should say, I had a book coach myself, more like a developmental editor that worked with me outside of my editor from Random House. I had a book incubator class, a year-long class that I was taking. Even though I teach those myself, I was in one. I also had a group of beta readers, some who were writers and some who were friends, and some who didn't know my story at all because I wanted to make sure that someone who doesn't know me would still feel connected to the story. So there were a lot of eyes on this book.
So tell us the story about, so you got the Modern Love piece published and you said, oh, I think this is the through line. Then what?
I had a very big misconception about what a modern love essay meant. Like, I thought I would have a modern love essay and then my whole life would change. And all of a sudden, everyone would want me to write a book. And I just like thought the path would be paved in gold after that. Did not happen, of course, the naive part of me. And then after that, then my agent spoke to these editors and they were sort of like not that into the idea. And I thought they were going to be really excited. So that was a disappointment. And then what happened, which is I think what always happens, was I figured out that I needed to write the book that I wanted to write and that I believed in, and that I would have to have faith in this book that it could be something before anyone else would. And so I just had to get going and write the book. And if I believed it was a book that was not solely a motherhood or a fertility book, I had to show my agent and show the editors what this book could be. That's what I did. So that was from 2019 and we finally sold the book to Random House in December 2022. And my Modern Love came out in, I think it was June or July 2019. So whatever that math is, 2.5, 4 years.
Two really important questions because I know our listeners are wondering. A, how did you have the agent in the first place? And B, did you write the book and not the proposal?
So I had another book that was sold called Free Fall. And it was a memoir about my ex who had taken his own life after about 6 months of being together. And I had written a whole memoir. It was sold to HarperCollins. It was a very big deal. And I had written the whole thing. And at some point, my book proposal leaked and my ex's family ended up getting a lawyer and not suing me, but saying that they would sue HarperCollins, and HarperCollins pulled out of the book deal.
Oh, Ruthie.
It was this horrible, horrible thing where you know how long it takes not only to like get an idea and then get the book deal and then write the book, but all of that had happened and then the book deal was pulled out from under me. So it was this horrible time and that happened in April 2019. And so I was crushed during that time. And I didn't know what to do. I thought my book career was over because I also thought, like, how would I ever get another book deal after losing this one? The only thing I could think of to do was to try writing something else. And I knew I had other stories in me. And that's what led to me to write this Modern Love. But I like called everyone I knew that was an author, and no one had really ever heard of anything like this happening, of a book deal being pulled. But now I know other people and it's awful, but you get back up and you keep going.
First of all, I'm so sorry that you went through that. I can't even imagine how difficult that was. So when that happened, what advice was your agent giving you? Like, was she like, okay, get right back up on the saddle, let's write something else? Or was she like, take a minute, maybe take a little pause? I'm so curious, like what that conversation was like with your agent.
Well, I had a lawyer. I mean, this was like everyone layering up. It was not a pretty sight. And the lawyer had told my agent and I, why don't you just write this as a novel? Write it as a novel. It's a great story. But I had decided at that point that, you know what, maybe the universe is telling me something. This is not the book. And I had written it the way I wanted to, and it didn't happen. And so here we are. So my agent said, like, take some time and come back to me and let me know. And that's when I came back to her after The Modern Love came out and said, I think this is my book. And this is a more universal story. And that's when she talked to the editors and they were like,
So you did not get a deal then, just based on the Modern Love essay that you wrote. They were still like, no, we're not interested in this. So then you decided, you know what? I'm just going to write the book. I'm just going to write it, and then we're going to go back to the editors.
Yes, but I didn't write the whole book. So this is the thing that you guys probably know too, right? In order to get to a proposal, I had to write enough of the book to know what the proposal was going to even look like. Because it's hard, at least for me and a lot of my clients, it's really hard without writing and just letting it flow to sort of understand what the full narrative arc's going to be. It was like a year plus writing the book, and I probably got like halfway through, and then I transitioned to proposal. I got the proposal down. My agent and I went back and forth, and then the book, we went out with it in, I think, October of 22. But I think another interesting thing to note for your listeners is that I think we went out to something like 39 editors, and we got 37 rejections on it. And then there were 2 editors that were still interested. But the overwhelming feedback was that it was too memoir focused, that I needed to add more plus research, journalistic investigation, whatever you want to call it. And so my book actually didn't sell on my proposal. I had to go back and write a 2-page memo that kind of outlined the plus parts that I was going to add in, the hybrid parts I would add into my memoir. And that's how I ended up selling my book. That was something else that I hadn't really heard. I mean, a lot of things have happened to me that I haven't really heard a whole lot, which was good, but also hard because after it sold and it was time to sit down to write, I didn't have a proposal as a roadmap. I had to start from scratch at that point because I only had the 2-page memo.
Hey there, Bookbound friends. If you're a fan of this podcast, you've definitely heard us talk about the agony and the ecstasy of the nonfiction book proposal. Yes, proposals are challenging, and yes, they can take a while, but we truly believe that for nonfiction writers, mastering the art of the book proposal, and we really do think it's an art, isn't just necessary to land a book deal. It's one of the best ways to become the expert of your own topic and to sharpen your craft. That's why Fran and I wrote our ebook. It's called Bookbound, a tried and true method for turning your great idea into a standout book proposal. It's available now at bookboundpodcast.com/ebook for just $19.99. So if you're serious about your idea, but not quite ready to invest in coaching or courses, this is the perfect place to start. Download our ebook today and take the first real step toward writing the book only you can write.
So I actually have a question for both of you because you both have more experience with memoir, whereas my experience is more with prescriptive nonfiction. I wonder if with memoir, it is important to write more of the book before you work on the proposal. Whereas with prescriptive nonfiction, like I'm writing my 3rd book right now. And for me, I only wrote like 2 chapters of the book, while I was working on my book proposal. So do you think that's too generic of a statement to make about memoir versus prescriptive nonfiction, or what's your experience been?
Fran, I bet if you thought about it for a couple minutes, you would be able to know exactly what I'm about to say. I don't think it's the form. I think it's the writer. So I'm a pantser, not a planner, and you are a planner, not a pantser. I would have to write before I even knew my idea if I was writing the most prescriptive book in the world. And I just can't plan. My body doesn't work that way.
That's so interesting. Whereas I am the planner. I'm all about like the framework and like the proposal template. And I spent, a year working on the proposal for my current book. The planner versus pantser thing, I totally get. What about you, Ruthie? What do you think?
I think Bethany's right. That's basically what I was going to say, because I work with a lot of writers that are writing prescriptive books, like you're talking about, thought leadership books, big ideas books, and they need to write through those ideas to even know what the framework is. So I do think it depends.
Obviously, we all need the framework. We all need the proposal. We all need to get to the same place to sell the book. How you get there is going to be really different. And I do think it's interesting, though, to think about, with all that said, I think what you're saying is actually pretty interesting. And it could be that in a memoir, you're going to just need to unearth more. But I think, it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, I will say that so the first 2 memoirs that I wrote, the ones that sold, both of them I had to write a lot, but I'm working on a 3rd memoir right now, and this one, maybe because some of the ideas for this memoir were unearthed in the writing of the Mother Code, but now I see the full narrative arc, and I just wrote 3 chapters and an outline for the whole thing, and I was able to do it just fairly quickly because I kind of already had marinated in the ideas, I think. So,
Congratulations. That's exciting.
thank you. We'll see. We'll see. I haven't even showed my agent yet. This is like very new.
That's great. So will you then transition into proposal?
So I looked back at my contract, and because I worked with Random House on this book, they get first right of refusal, and so in the contract it says they'll take a look at either 3 chapters and a full outline or a proposal of 75, I think it's a 75 pages or less, something like that. I can go either way, but the thing would be that if Random House did not take the book based on the 3 chapters in the outline, I'd have to then transition into a proposal to sell to someone else. I'd have to be ready to write the proposal.
But it sounds like 3 chapters and an outline is perfect, especially since that's how you want to write anyway. That's exciting.
That's so exciting.
So it's forcing me to be a planner when I'm usually a pantser. So
Oh my gosh, I love this. Ruthie, tell us about the title, The Mother Code, because you definitely use that phrase in the book. I'm wondering, was it the title first and then you incorporated it into the book? Or did the title come from your writing?
actually, the first title was, I'm giving you guys some top secret information here. It was M other in parentheses. So mother, but the other is in parentheses. Then I was told that that seemed very like academic, like if I was doing some sort of like research paper. And then I came back with the Mother Code. And at first, the Mother Code was supposed to be referring to the flaw that I thought existed in my genetic code, which was the reason I thought I shouldn't have a child, this sort of curse that hovered over me my whole life that told me that the women in my family all had abandoned their children. This was like the family mythology that I lived with. And that if I had a child, I would abandon my child too. So that Mother Code was the flaw that was in my genetic code, or I believed was in my genetic code. And then in the writing of the book, as I realized the more universal story that I was talking about earlier, this idea that each of us carries our own mother code story or human code or parent code story, whatever we want to call it, then the title shifted to really be about how there isn't a binary of childless cat lady and trad wife or Brady Bunch woman. It really is about how we all have our own, there are as many narratives as there are people. And so that's what the Mother Code became. So it went from personal to universal, but it took writing the entire book before I realized that. And also, I wasn't sure if the Mother Code was supposed to be the like outdated codes that we've outgrown or the new codes that we're trying to move into. There were like all of these ideas around what the Mother Code actually stood for. So it took a lot.
Yeah, well, I actually think that really speaks to why it's such a powerful title. Fran and I always talk about titles in terms of guiding image metaphors or tropes. And the more layered the title is, the more juice, the better it will carry a book. So everything that you're saying, I think, really speaks to why this is a really great title because it has so many meanings.
Thank you for saying that. That really resonates with me. And the other thing I'm thinking of is code really refers to DNA code, genetic code, which also relates to where I end up in the book, which is having a daughter or using a donor egg. So in the end, I don't get to use, or I probably wouldn't say it that way. In the end, I don't end up using my DNA, which was such a big sort of worry for me earlier in the book because of all the things I thought my DNA had carried. So this idea of genes really runs through the whole book. And so the code also refers to that.
So, Ruthie, I'd love to hear you talk about something that all of our listeners are always wondering about. And I'm really curious about how you position yourself in terms of the old platform question. I have this really wonderful idea that we're moving through some of the really terrible ideas about that. And as an agent, I work with people who are experts in their field and they don't have a single follower on Instagram, but they're experts and very influential and have a lot of reach. And this is, how a lot of these books are being published. I'm hopeful, but it's an old idea. And I'd love to hear your take on it as an author, but also as a book coach and what you're seeing out there and how you talk to people about it.
So I feel like I did not have a big platform when I sold my book. I don't know that I do even now. I think I had maybe 1,200 followers on Instagram. So it wasn't like I had a huge Instagram. I did have a Substack, but I had moved over from MailChimp and it was fairly new, maybe 1,000 subscribers on Substack. But the thing that I think I did have, and what I talk to my clients about, is this idea of micro communities, which is where I think we're moving. It's like, do you have influence in smaller niche communities that can then help spread the word? And so I have my own writers collective where I teach my courses and work one-on-one with people writing books. So that's one community. I also am part of numerous women's networks. And I'm also, any number of things, right? My Substack. So those micro communities, there's like tentacles to them. They can tap into others. And I think that positioning around that is, I'm hoping as well, more of the trend we're going to see, because who has, millions of followers like a celebrity? And we also know that even celebrities that have millions of followers don't necessarily sell books.
That's what I was just going to say, right? I've seen celebrities that have literally millions of followers on social media and their books don't become bestsellers. So
Nope.
I'm really hopeful, like, both of you, that we're moving away from this, number of social media followers as a metric that publishing houses look at, and that it is more about what is your influence in your community? Like, what does that look like? I'm also really curious, Ruthie, what's worked for you? Like from a marketing perspective, your book came out a few months ago now. Do you have a sense of what's moved the needle?
I do so far. Hopefully there's going to be more and more. There's more runway, but I do. And I'm actually planning on writing about this in Substack because I've been finding it so interesting. So I didn't get the big review in the New York Times that I had hoped for, the New Yorker, New York Magazine, these kinds of things that I was like, really hoping for in the beginning. What did move the needle are a few things. One, writing essays, book adjacent essays. So kind of companion pieces really helped. So I wrote pieces there were excerpts in The Guardian, Oprah Daily. I wrote pieces for Romper, Time, and I just wrote one for Lit Hub today, actually, which was really great. The other thing that really moved the needle and sort of the big win was I was on NPR All Things Considered, and that was huge. And then that led to my book being chosen for Book of the Day from NPR, and then on NPR's Best of the Year so far for 2025. So that was like the gift that kept on giving, which was huge. But I will say the other things that really helped were bulk buys. So I had two different larger brand partnerships in the mom space. And so having a book about motherhood allowed me to sort of go, spread into that space more. And there are a lot of people that are interested in motherhood. Whatever the editor said, that's not true, because there's tons of people interested in motherhood, which is not a niche subject. But you know what? The thing that I talk to my clients about is that no matter what you're writing about, there are going to be sort of these larger communities around it, and that's finding a way to leverage that. The other thing that I found really moved the needle was I was featured as the lead story in Most Powerful Women Daily Fortunes newsletter that used to be called the Broadsheet, and that really helped. And so those kinds of like Substack or kind of niche newsletters, if you can get kind of spotlighted in some of those, that is really key. I feel like most sales came from a kind of Substack book tour that I did, where I went and got like Q&As and profiles and got people to spotlight me, and I did the same for other writers, spotlighting them.
What's great too about Substack is that everyone's looking for content. So if you can provide them with excerpts from the book, or, here's kind of like a Q&A that you can run with me, like you're making their job easier.
Platonic Love is a really fun Substack, and they asked me for like some of my fave recs, like just not even book stuff. And that got me. I saw it, like I noticed in my author portal when you can see your sales, like that got me so much. So you don't know. And also, I should say IRL events like book tour.
Ruthie, did you hire someone to help you with PR, or was it all Random House and you?
I did hire someone to help me with PR in addition. And a whole nother podcast would be what worked with that and what didn't, because I also feel like they were great. And at the same time, most of the things that I got were things that came through connections I had. That's the truth. And I'm a journalist and have been for many years. So I happen to have a lot of connections. So in a way, maybe like I was an ideal client, they kept saying, because it's like they could help me, but I had the in.
And by the way, that also goes back to platform, right? When you're pitching the marketing section of the proposal, I'm sure that was a big part of it, was that you were a journalist, that you do have these media connections, right? It's helpful. So we have to get really creative and think about every single thing that can help. One thing that I saw that you posted, I can't remember if it was Instagram or if you wrote this on your Substack, but I loved it. You wrote about how a book tour may not always carry a financial ROI, but it will always carry an emotional ROI. Tell us what you mean by that.
Everything from relationships with bookstore owners and people that work there, which do make a difference because then your book gets highlighted or becomes a staff favorite, to seeing friends and even clients in person, clients that I had never met in person, only knew over Zoom. That was so wonderful. And then there's also the like ego part of it, of like, you spent so long in a room by yourself writing this thing, and now to get to be in the world talking about the ideas that are so important to you, there's nothing better than that. I mean, I did the math and I had a receipt in my Substack that was like, look, there's no way I ever made back the money that I laid out for this, or the time, because I don't know about you guys, but my publisher was not paying for my book tour. So all the time of booking stuff and the money will never get back, but I still think it was worth it.
Yeah. And it's so great to be intentional in that way, like to know, like it's not all about the financial piece. It's so fun now being a bookstore owner and being able to host authors, and, whether it's an author talk or a meet and greet, and just seeing like their faces light up when they see their family and friends come to the bookstore to support them, or when there's like an open Q&A and they get asked a really interesting question. And it's just so joyful for them and for me and for the staff at the bookstore. So the emotional piece, after this very, very long journey of pitching the book, writing the book, getting the book into production and distribution and getting it out there, making room and time for that in your life is really important.
Well, and it's reminding me, like, we get so into the process, especially the three of us, that we forget that this is about changing the world. We're writing these books to communicate something, to actually affect and impact human beings. And I mean, it seems crazy, but we can kind of lose track of that. So I love this idea of getting out there and going to the bookstores and talking about the book and changing people's lives.
That's really meaningful to me too, because I was thinking when I was thinking about the audience for the book that I really wanted, of course, I want everyone to read the book, but also I was thinking a lot about younger readers because really I was thinking about who I was and the books that I wanted to be reading when I was in my late 20s, 30s, and even early 40s. And then to be in those bookstores and see young people that are having the same questions, like having me sign their book and tell me they're like excited that someone's thinking about these things too, or someone that's ahead of them a little bit on the journey is thinking about these ideas. That just was so meaningful to be like, oh, this is who I thought my audience was going to be. And look, they're here.
Well, maybe that's a good place to end.
Yeah, I think so. That was kind of perfect. The only other thing, Ruthie, that I would love to just for you to leave everybody with is just any kind of final piece of advice or like anything that you would have done differently throughout this process. I know our listeners always love kind of hearing that.
One is in terms of book tour, not to measure my success based on the number of people in the room in book tour, because looking back, I had stops where I had 40 people in a room and I sold 5 books, and I had stops where I had 10 people in a room and I sold 10 books. So back to the ROI piece, there's no telling. Just because you have a big crowd doesn't mean you're going to sell a ton of books. So that's one piece. Another is just thinking about marketing plan, is that the people that were most helpful were not necessarily the ones that I was thinking about. So like I went to grad school at NYU, and so I'm going to have an alum event at the J School at NYU in September. And so I think a lot of my clients, when we're building out a marketing plan, they're not thinking about their like church or temple, where did they go to high school or grad school or college or whatever. There's so many groups that we're all a part of that we kind of forget about. And that also people in our extended network just writing those emails to be like, here's what would be helpful. And you'd be surprised at kind of who's going to stand up and raise that hand.
It's so true. Ruthie, I feel like we could talk to you all day. There's so much to learn from you, like not just as an author, but also as a coach. And tell our listeners, where can they find you?
Oh my gosh, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Substack. My Substack is The Spark. So you can find me on Substack. You can find me on Instagram at RU Ackerman. You can find me on LinkedIn at Ruthie Ackerman. The Mother Code at your indie bookstore. Oh, my website, ruthieackerman.com.
And this book, by the way, I just have to show it for the video part.
Yay.
It is so good. It's just so beautifully written. Congratulations, Ruthie, on everything. All of the accolades that you're getting. You deserve every single one.
Thank you for having me. I love you guys. Bethany, we should talk. I bet I have clients that you might like for agenting and all of that good stuff. And Fran, I can't wait to be able to get up to your bookstore. That's like on my list of bookstore tour.
We would love to have you. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and consider leaving a rating or review to help other writers find us. And don't forget to check out our Read Like a Writer book club and our downloadable Bookbound proposal guide, both designed to support you as you bring your book idea to life. You can also find us on Instagram at bookbound_podcast. Happy writing!